Hey, witches, hold on tight to your goat because it is Wednesday and it is time for the Witches Movie Coven. Yes, witches, real witches talking about witches in movies. That and one wayward cat. So we're going to go. Hi, I am Patti Negri. I am one of your hosts. You might know me from my regular podcast, The Witching Hour, or from my regular appearances on Ghost Adventures, or from right here, the Witches Movie Coven, my school, University Magicus. But let me introduce you, or have them introduce themselves, to my beautiful co-host. Let's start with beautiful Courtney this week.
That's me, Courtney Buckley. I'm Ghostbait on Scared and Alone, and I love being a part of this coven. So here I am on this Wednesday. I just finished watching this week's movie, so I have some opinions as usual.
Will there be hexing tonight?
My shirt. I don't know if you can check this out. This is my new mystery control shirt. On the back, it says "Don't make me hex you," and maybe I'll show you later.
We would love.
So we'll see.
Thank you, Richard-Lael.
I am Richard-Lael. Richard-Lael is one name, not two. If I were just Richard, I would be a. That's right. I am known as the gentleman psychic. I used to be a psychic and a small, but I gained some weight. So psychic and medium. I am here in New Orleans. You can find me a little bit of everywhere. I am sometimes at University Magicus. I am on occasion. I'm on a podcast here or there. You can also find me at Sometimes Scared and Alone. You can find me a little bit of everywhere. I'm really easy to find. I'm just the gentleman psychic, where all gentlemen psychics are sold.
Thank you very much. Our fair-haired Jason Mankey.
So you say fair hair, that could be Heather too, right? So you never know. I'm a Llewellyn author. This is my latest book, which will be out in May. High Priest, a biography of Raymond Buckland. It's my 10th book. I write a lot and I travel a lot. Next week with Heather, I will be in Minneapolis at Pagonicon. I'm very excited about that.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. And speaking of Heather, moving to Heather Greene.
Hi, I am Heather Greene. I am the author of Lights, Camera, Witchcraft. I actually have it right here. It is a critical history of witches and witchcraft in American film and television. I am also a journalist covering all things occult, as well as an editor at Llewellyn Worldwide, the same place that has published Jason's 10th book, and I believe all of them, or close to all of them. So I am not his editor, but I am an editor for many other wonderful authors, one of which is whose book is coming out soon. Patti?
Yes, Dollcraft, A Witch's Guide to Puppet Magic and Haunted Dolls. I am so excited about this book, and I'm so excited about my beautiful foreword by Heather herself, and she is my editor, and that I'm with Llewellyn is literally a dream come true for me. So it'll be released in the first week of June. You actually can pre-order it already, and I am giddy as a schoolgirl.
Me too.
Yeah. So this week's movie, Horror Hotel, black and white, 1960. I hope you all watched it under the covers. Maybe I did. But just in case you didn't watch it by some weird chance, Richard-Lael, do you have an unbiased synopsis of this beautiful film?
And how?
Yay, best part of the show.
Once upon a time, in faraway England, where the film was actually made, but pretending to be in outside of Salem somewhere in 1692, was a witch that, of course, according to history, all witches were burned outside of Salem. They were never burned inside of Salem. They were always burned outside of Salem, because that's just the way that it is, right? So this satanic witch, she is accursed, and she has made a pact with the devil himself. And then, of course, in her dying breath, like every witch film, she curses the town and she praises Satan, like one does. And of course, she's burned at the stake. And then fast forward to 1960, modern day 1960 New England, and not in any way a studio in England in any way. Definitely New England. A college professor, Christopher Lee, is teaching about witchcraft and, of course, about the burning times that absolutely 100% was historically accurate, and any professor would know that. Anyway, burning times, and there is one of his pupils is incredibly fascinated by the entire concept of witchcraft, and in a way that is not sinister or creepy at all. The professor encourages this obviously, clearly 18-year-old girl who is not in any way 35, convinces her to go to this little town outside of Salem, where she is to stay at this hotel, and just to mention the name. So she goes to this hotel, and along the way in this little town, she finds that it looks like any little town, excepting for any little town that had a fog machine, for instance, that was running from every corner, every street corner, every belfry, every window was a fog machine. Lots and lots of fog. And then she sees an abandoned church. She goes to the inn, and wouldn't you know it, we have no room in the inn for little baby Jesus. And she says, oh yeah, well, my professor thinks otherwise. And of course, the innkeep has every right. She says, oh, well, we do have room. And of course, the hotel is completely empty, excepting the fact that it's not. The other guests are never around during these hours. And of course, she goes into the room. She is in her obligatory underwear because it's a horror film. She gets dressed. She exits. She finds the old church. She wants to go explore the old church and is met by an old man who's the minister who's blind. And he has warned her. He opens the door and he says, "Get out!" which is exactly every reaction I wish I would have had when I was growing up going to church. I wish that would have just happened. It didn't, and I was Pentecostal. I digress. So she is a little bit, dare I say, paranoid as to what might be. And she wanders into an occult bookshop. They don't have a gas station. They don't have any other buildings but a bookstore, a church, and this hotel. But they have a bookstore, and it's an occult bookstore. So she wanders in and she borrows a book from the woman who turns out to be the granddaughter of the old minister. She goes back into her room and she starts hearing from beneath the floorboards chantings, which is great. Lots of chantings, which is impossible because, oh, well, the floorboards are filled in and there's nothing underground, nothing at all, nothing underground at all. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, in the floor. And then it turns out that she has marked some spaces in the books, and she has found a dead bird, and that is a sign that she's marked by the witches. As it turns out, the witches have made a pact in this town to ouster any signs of Christianity. And dare I say, I understand the sentiment. I was raised Pentecostal. So she ends up by turning up missing. Just happened. She's gone. She didn't heed the warning. Her boyfriend, who is in no way a British actor, he's completely an American actor. He does not sound even slightly British at all, excepting for part of the time. He goes north to find this girl. He meets the lady from the bookshop. As it turns out, she is the next mark on the witches' Sabbath. And long story short, hero, shadows, fog machines, religious man. The boy there was going back up to the town. There was a visit from the actual devil himself, who appeared out of nowhere and then disappeared out of nowhere. The hero goes off to save the girl, gets stabbed in the back by the witches who are trying to kill her. And then he stumbles upon the crosses, which why in the world are there crosses if they're witches and they didn't want crosses? They couldn't even come near. They're not vampires, they're witches. Anyway, so these non-vampire witches somehow burst into flames as he is dying and dragging the cross forward, and then more fog machines, and then 20 minutes of credits. That's about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Richard-Lael. I have a much clearer understanding than I did 2 days ago when I watched the movie. But just in case, there might be a little bit more information that you missed just a little bit. Heather, our beautiful academic type of book on this. Do you have 5 things we do need to know about Horror Hotel?
Yeah, there's some fun things about this little movie. First, it is a British movie. It's not an American movie. And I was very disappointed when I was doing my research because I watched it before I realized it was British years ago. And I was like, darn, I really want to talk about it. But it is a British movie about a small New England town, which if you've listened to me enough, Courtney's already rolling her eyes. We know that is one of Hollywood and British filmmakers' favorite place to set a movie about witchcraft. If a movie is set in a small New England town, there's a good chance there's going to be witchcraft. And here we have it. So this movie was made in the late 50s, released in England, in the UK in 1960. Under the name The City of the Dead. So that was the English name. It got really bad reviews. It got released in the US as Horror Hotel. A little bit more of marketing decided to change the name. That happens frequently. That's not unusual. It was directed by John Llewellyn Mankey, and this is his first big film, if you could call it a big film. And then he went on to direct a ton of, and I have a list of, it's fun, a ton of TV episodes that you guys will all, especially people who are of a certain age, including Magnum PI, Murder, She Wrote, Matlock, Scarecrow and Mrs. King, Charlie's Angels, Kung Fu, Shaft, Mission Impossible, Hawaii Five-0. So he was really big in the TV directing scene for a long time in the 70s and 80s. So that is the basis of it, all of the good stuff. Now, this movie was actually originally created was going to be a series in Boris Karloff series of TV shows called Thrillers. So thrillers were released 1960 to 1962, 3, and it was sort of like Twilight Zone. It was around the same time. Popular shows like Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, these were shows that were happening. There was another one I can't think of the name of right now. It was similar, paranormal-esque, spooky TV type shows about weird things were really becoming popular at this time. And so this was one of them. Boris Karloff did this particular, Thrillers, and this was originally going to be written for one of those episodes. The Thrillers, interestingly enough, and maybe we'll do this as a series, it kind of would be fun, had 4 really interesting witchy TV shows that I looked at. One is called The Weird Tailor, A Wig for Miss Devore, La Strega, God Grant That She Lies Still. A lot of these have to do with similar things where you have a witch coming back from the dead or something. A witch coming back.
Ah, he got you this time. That's been 2 weeks at least of him trying.
Richard-Lael, we're going to have words after. Someone's going to be hexed. And I don't hex people on this show, so be ready. Anyway, so there's Boris Karloff, his famous role. So anyway, he did this show, and there's a lot of witchy stuff. Not all of these type of shows had witchy stuff. The Thrillers did. And so this eventually, the script they wrote was too long, and they turned it into the movie that we know today, City of the Dead. So the timing of this, as I said, is kind of interesting. This is number 3, early 1960s. So in the UK, similar to the US, but not quite. But I have to speak about the US because that's my area, is that by the late 1950s, Hollywood started to break down the code. So you started to see a little bit more you start to see horror move closer to what we know it to be, the satanic witchcraft stuff. Prior to this, there was very little. The very first film that really put Satan in a witchcraft film is a Roger Corman film, which is 1959. Then you have some of the Twilight Zone stuff, the thriller stuff going on TV. You have another Roger Corman film, and you have some schlock films like Naked Witch, which is a really fun 1961 to watch, and we can do that. And you have a bunch of other similar low budget films. House of Black Death is really fun to watch, 1965. I highly recommend. Which we can also do. So there's a bunch of them, but there's few and far between. This movie really feels like we're getting close to the 1970s. It's not quite the 1970s horror film, but it's getting there. And it's a little early for it, but it's getting there. And this is one of the signs we're moving in that direction. So it's really interesting. And it involves the representation of witchcraft prior to 1969 really wasn't very good, but this one has little pieces in it, although mostly it's what you would expect. More like what you get out of the 70s films, with a little bit of maybe something recognizable, but really not. But I think they could have redone this film in the 70s and it would have been successful as well. Just changing the hairstyles and the clothing. So that's it. And the cast, really, there's not many people that are notable. Mostly are British actors. There were a few American actors, Richard-Lael in this. They all had the affected accent, though, that was very prominent during this period of time. But of course, the most notable, and here, hold on, there he is. The most notable actor, of course, Christopher Lee, who we just saw last week in Lord of the Rings. He's in a Wicker Man. Do we have our Wicker Man photo? Of course,
Yes.
Lord of the Rings, Sleepy Hollow, Dark Shadows, of course, Dracula. There he is, Dracula. He is Count Dooku in Star Wars, and of course, he's in a host of other films. I think we said a couple others when we were off that we can't list them all. Oh, Return from Witch Mountain, one of my favorites as a kid. So there's a ton. I mean, this man has done it all, right? Then there's the other actors really aren't ones that are terribly notable. They have a few credits to their name. One that might be interesting would be Anne Beach. She played Lottie. She was the mute assistant that eventually gets killed. She was in Hotel Paradiso. She was the mom in Notting Hill. She was also a character in James and the Giant Peach. So she had a few credits there that were notable. And then number 5, this is something I totally pulled off of Wikipedia. I'm going to just tell you, is that even though this film is something that we probably never heard of, most of you probably never heard of it, it has a legacy. No, there's no musical, Courtney. Horror Hotel, the musical, sorry. But it is in music. And I have a list. And I actually did check the Wikipedia out before I would report back to you guys, of course. But it's been mentioned in a number of musicals because music in lyrics and stuff. And it is not surprising because during the 70s and 80s, there's this notion that the occult saved rock and roll. There's actually a book, or saved music. There is a book actually by that name. And that the occult was used by a lot of bands, occult imagery and stuff. So you have, for example, Iron Maiden uses a clip from the movie in their Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter. You also have Rob Zombie sampling the line Suspicion, Fear, and Jealousy from Christopher Lee. You have the same thing happening in the Misfits song Horror Hotel. Or no, I'm sorry. They named the song Horror Hotel. You also have clips in Witching Hour, the song by, I think I can't read my own handwriting, in the Moment. King Diamond, clips in Sleepless Nights video, and the punk band UFX uses video clips in the video for their Bitch video, whatever song. So it's used, which I thought was really interesting because it's this little film.
It's
that
also
did
in the public
horribly.
domain, though.
It is in the public domain, so you
Which,
can
yeah.
sample it to use occult stuff, and it's all out there. So that's really interesting. And the one thing I have left to say, if you really didn't get the plot, all you have to do is understand that if Psycho, Rebecca, and Mark of the Witch had a love child, it would be this movie. Psycho, the movie Rebecca, and the movie Mark of the Witch. That is this movie, and I can talk more about that later.
Thank you. That is beautiful. All right. Let's
There it is. Bring your daughter to the
I
slaughter.
want to sing along to that now because the chorus is
go,
so
Jason.
catchy. But we would have to like pay for we'd have to pay for me singing the song because of ASCAP.
We would have to pay with our ears, I'm afraid.
Also that bring your daughter, sorry. Oh, there we go. That's it. I did want to say like one historical thing. So if you watch the movie, they sacrifice the girl on Candlemas, which is really a Catholic holiday on February 2nd, more than it is a pagan holiday. But if you read witch literature from the early 20th century, Margaret Murray, for example, says that Candlemas was one of the witch holidays. It was not as important as others, but it was a witch holiday. In Gerald Gardner's witchcraft book, Witchcraft Today, he calls the February Sabbath February Eve because the witches would have practiced on January 31st. But in his second book, The Meaning of Witchcraft, which came out in 1958, he calls the Sabbath Candlemas, which leads me to believe they might have done a tad bit of research on witchcraft when they put this movie together.
And I think you're absolutely right. I think, and I actually tried to search for that details, and there's a few other things that I couldn't have access to because I don't have full access to the Margaret Herrick Library. But this was right after all of that was coming out and released in the UK. So they absolutely would have had some access to it. And this might be the first instance of that in the UK, at least. So
absolutely,
I think that's fascinating. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start. I will start. And I think part of I completely was engrossed in the film. It's the first time I ever saw it. And I watched it. I was literally in the Puget Sound on a Vashon Island, alone on a farm in a farmhouse on an island that doesn't have Uber or Uber Eats, and I didn't have a car. And this was the kind of the perfect movie to watch because I'm alone. So, once I got past the finest use of fog machines I have ever seen, it's like my husband comes from Fresno. They are known for their two-leaf fog. They don't have this much fog, and they are known from blinding fog. But I thought for 1960, they did pretty damn good with it. So I totally got engrossed in it. That's how I'm watching it, as a movie, not as a witch, not as anything else. And I totally was there. I got scared at all the right moments. I felt for that little girl being alone, the little 18-year-old, 36-year-old. It's just everything about it. Even though this was going back to my early days on the Witches Movie Coven, watching it on my iPhone, under the covers, and I wasn't under the covers, so I didn't wake up my husband. He wasn't there. I was under the covers so that the witches didn't get me. And the fog didn't get me in my Pacific Northwest that I was. But I bought into all of it. I mean, silly movie. It's a horror movie, the kind that I like. Everybody gets knocked off. Where's everybody? The family goes to find her. And I love that late 1950s, 1960s sensibility, how you had cocktail parties, how you dressed. That was just the height of everything. Because my parents were that was my parents. My mom in those 1960s had these weird cocktail parties where everybody carried what we would almost call a briefcase. Everybody had big orbs. I got big orbs.
I've got big orbs. I cannot.
Wow.
Best comment of the night.
We need a T-shirt of that.
I've got big orbs.
I
dash
definitely-
Patti.
Oh, no, my dad, I remember, and I think I have it from like 50 years ago. They had these, they were like little suitcases. They looked like half the size of a carry-on. They were portable bars. You would open them up, and one side fit a bottle, and you had your 2 martini glasses, and you had your shaker, and you had your, you measure your thing out, and you had all the little bar tools in one easy, like purse size hand. And that's what I was a kid growing up to. And that's what this movie looked like to me. And it made me so very, very happy. That and the fog machines. That's it. That's all I got. We can talk about witchy stuff later.
Courtney hasn't said anything.
Yeah.
Is anyone sure they want me to?
Yes,
Because-
Oh
yes.
yes, we are
Oh
sure.
boy.
Oh,
All right.
psycho.
Well, let me set the stage then. Obviously, I had never heard of this movie before. And I did what I do every Wednesday, which is I look up where to watch it and then check how many minutes it is, so that I can plan accordingly so I can be finished by the time we're ready to go. So an hour and 19 minutes. Oh, that's my shirt. I'm wearing the sweatshirt version of right now. An hour and 19 minutes, and I was ready to go, and I chose to watch it on YouTube because it was free, and I started it, and the first thing I saw was the chanting of burn the witch, and I thought, great. Here we go. It's my favorite thing that ever happens in every movie, because they were dressed like Puritans, so I knew what was coming, and then it was a small New England town, and I was like, amazing. I'm going to gouge my eyes out about it. Then I kind of liked I did like the set of the town. I thought it was very spooky, and I wish that I could be there, and it would be a great place to have a haunted house. But somehow this movie felt longer than Lord of the Rings last week at an hour and 19 minutes. I felt like I was watching it for one entire eternity. And to me, the best part of the movie was the constant stream of ads on YouTube. So I feel like I was like struggling to pay attention as usual to some of these. And what's so amazing about that is Richard-Lael's entire unbiased synopsis was everything that I retained from it. So I feel like I did a pretty good job as far as, paying attention to it, but it was just not my kind of movie. I think that she was definitely, I don't care if she was actually in her 20s, she looked like she was at least 35. I could not get past that. The lady, the witch lady who was just always standing around.
What
like
lady?
This, like, the who lady. Who was standing around so seriously, like very stern all the time. And then the best part, when they were like, get in the shadow of the cross, and then he's like clinging onto the giant crucifix and dragging it around the cemetery, that one, and then they all started lighting on fire.
It was awesome.
What, like, first of all, at that point I was looking directly at the television because I was a little excited about that. But I said in the comments too, it's like, these, if they were vampires, which they could have very well been because they behaved like them in some ways, they were more accurate movie vampires than Twilight. So we have to give the movie that. So yeah, that's it. That's my take on it. It was somehow longer than Lord of the Rings.
I watched it on YouTube, and I didn't have any commercials. And I see Mickey right there too. Watched it on YouTube. Not many ads. I watched it on YouTube without commercials at all.
I watched it on every 6 minutes. I actually was timing the commercial, sometimes as quick as 5 minutes, and I got a commercial in the first 2 minutes of the movie starting. And with 2 minutes left in the film, I got another commercial, and they're never synced up to a place.
No, in the middle of sentences
for a commercial.
Yeah, that's why I pay for Prime, even though it's silly. I don't like commercials, and it is worth it for me to pay to never have a commercial.
I normally do, but I had a hunch about this movie, as Taya sort of alluded to in the comments, because I talked to her about this earlier. But I had a hunch, and I didn't want to be upset that I'd spent $3 on it. So I decided to suffer through the ads, and I had seen Jason's text about how many ads are in the movie, and I thought, whatever. But it gave my ADHD a break, which I think actually helped in the long run, because I feel like I retained more because there was a natural break every 3 minutes. So
it was a lot.
yeah.
Maybe if you would have watched it though without the ads, maybe you would have enjoyed it a little bit more.
Burn the Witch in a small town in New England. There was no hope for me for this. The only time that I've ever enjoyed that was Love at Stake, because it was ridiculous.
I will say that I actually love the idea of Burn Witch. I mean, the only time I'll ever have a smoking hot body is if I am a burning witch.
I would like to address Mary Jane King in the comments, who says, Courtney, you haven't seen enough 1960s movies. I beg to differ. I feel like I've seen more than enough at this point. That was just not it's not my generation of movies.
I think some of the classic movies we've watched have been the best things we've watched on this show. The one about the Witch in Love and Damn Yankees, those were like both great movies. And I'm like Courtney, I'm usually really skeptical of old movies, but Heather picks great old movies for us to watch sometimes. I didn't think this was one.
Yes.
Go, Jason.
There was a director's cut that a lot of people didn't know about. I actually watched the director's cut. And what you don't know is that once they are doing their ceremony, they actually gather around a 5-point star, I beg your pardon, like a pentagram, and then they call upon the spirit of a serial killer and they put it into a Christmas tree.
So you mean a 6-point star? Or what?
Oh, was it? Oh, yeah. This one was this.
Because when you said a 6-point star, oops, I mean a 5-point star. I went a 6-point star, like the Killing Tree, in my head.
Yeah, no.
So the Killing Tree is a sequel then to Horror Hotel.
All right, I'll reevaluate. I'll reevaluate my opinion then, now that I know that.
Richard-Lael.
I liked it. I mean, would I watch it? Yeah, I mean, I have watched it probably 3 or 4 times before. I never retain anything from it. It's just I enjoy the fog machines. I wish I had a fog machine here. I would look like I was a hippie in a VW van if I had those fog machines. And I would be incredibly happy about it. Also, even though the satanic witches are the bad guys, I kind of liked the satanic witches. And of course, the innkeeper was devious and brilliant. And also the professor, who was Christopher Lee.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time where he's wearing what looks like a brocade tablecloth with little clips on it. And I thought, you know what? You are a fabulous queen. I wish that I had a tablecloth that looked like that I could wear with little clips on my little bosoms. I think that would be great. And you know what? Maybe this girl here, maybe she's not in her 20s or 30s. And we have to remember that it is the 60s. And in those days, everyone looked older then. It's partially because of hair and makeup.
That's very true.
Yes.
Especially in the movies. Yes.
Especially in the movies. So
you look at high school photos of people and they look 30. I look at my parents' high school photos and they look 30. But she wasn't just in her underwear. She was a full-on corset, garter belt, garter. She looked like a Playboy spread. She looked great.
And the funny thing was, as structured as those undergarments were, then she puts on a little like a little chemise blouse and a little high-waisted skirt. And I went, all of that structure for that blouse?
She was trying to appease the devil in the privacy of her hotel room, not in the public eye.
Well, the devil is gay, so it didn't work.
I did like how the movie surprises you, because you think the movie's going to be about her, right? Her character's name is Nan Barlow. You think it's going to be about her, and then she dies 35 minutes into the film, and now the main characters have completely switched, and it's her boyfriend and her brother. Is that right? I think.
Yep.
But I thought that was like pretty gutsy on the part of the writer and the filmmakers, because you don't usually get that sort of thing in a movie, not even a horror movie.
I feel like too that when I was searching for clips, for quotes, which I did not find a lot of because it was not very quotable, but I was like, oh, for the first half of the movie, I was like, my only quote is Nan Barlow, because she said her full name 100 times, Nan Barlow, Nan Barlow, Nan Barlow. And then when she died, I was like, oh, wait, is it almost over? It has to be almost over now. And I checked the time and it was like 40 minutes. And I was like, what else happens?
Let me jump in here, because this is the intro. This is what I was getting at a little earlier when I mentioned the love child situation, is that is the setup for Psycho. That's the exact plot of Psycho. And that was one of the biggest groundbreaking elements that shocked people, is that the main character was killed halfway through the movie. And it's not just, interestingly enough, not just the main character Psycho, but it's the same thing. She is going to check something out, winds up at a hotel, winds up getting killed halfway through. In one of the most fantastic film scenes in all of Psycho is probably one of my top 5 films. It's a brilliant film. He is fantastic. Look at that. Oh, just takes my breath away. Anyway, she gets killed, and then there's the scene, of course. Classic. Then the sister is the one who comes in Psycho back to find out she hasn't been around for a while. What happened? Where is she? She's headed to go because she's escaping with money, but it's a different setup, but the concept is the same. The structure of that plot is exactly the same as this. So this gives off that vibe. And when I mentioned Rebecca, another Hitchcock, an earlier Hitchcock film, when Nan Barlow walks into the hotel and this dark woman figure comes down and starts talking and it's real creepy, that's right out of Rebecca. And if you haven't seen Rebecca, it's a brilliant black and white Hitchcock film. I can't remember the year of it. But based on a book, Rebecca de Mornay book, but it has the same feel. This has the feel of a Hitchcock film, which is what I noticed originally. And then I said Mark of the Witch, which is a 1970s film, which exactly that's from Rebecca. Same concept, same fear. Similar characters. And then if you add in the Mark of the Witch with a little dose of the Mark of the Witch, which is a 1971 film, horror film, where the girl is studying and interested in witchcraft, has a professor, and then winds up conjuring a witch from an old New England town 300 years ago. And she gets, the whole concept of the professor, the young student, and then this scary witch woman. So you have a little dose of that 1970s stuff coming in. So the 3 of them make up this movie. And I remember when I first saw it, I was like, this feels like Hitchcock. It has this feel to it. And Hitchcock movies move very slowly. They're brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And I could watch them forever. I could watch Psycho over and over again. They move slowly. The movies at this period of time, just technically speaking, the shot sequences, there's fewer shots. The shots are longer. The action moves slower. Our eyes and our brains are used to current films, which have a ton of shots that move faster, and the shots go faster, and the timing is totally different. It moves slower then. And so you have to get used to that. But this felt like a Hitchcock film. I was thrilled when I watched it the first time. Very surprised. Loved it. As I wish I had a clearer copy of it to watch, cleaner visuals, but I loved it and I enjoyed it again. And I disagree with Jason. I think this is a great example of 1960s British horror, early horror, and I thought it was super fun, and I really want a giant cross that shoots flames at people.
Yes.
So I've got a question about the Psycho comparisons.
Yeah.
Psycho comes out in June of 1960. This comes out in September of 1960. The book Psycho comes out in 1959. Is it a coincidence that they both have a similar structure, or were they influenced by what else was going on at the time?
That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to, because was there someone sharing information? Because that is Psycho's, one of the things that makes Psycho so unique. So I'd have to look at the timing of it. Is it possible that the script for Psycho was written and then someone got a hold of it and then wrote this script? I don't know. Now
I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
I'm just going to say this was also written as a TV show. So it was written shorter. So it might be coincidence because it might have been half. So I'm not sure the answer to that question.
Yeah.
it is an
interesting coincidence. Sorry, Richard.
Yeah.
I have a theory as to why it is. I think it is a coincidence. Oftentimes, if you look in, Heather, your entire book is about during this decade we have this. During this decade we start seeing these things. During this decade we start seeing this other thing. Not to bring it back to my favorite show, but the Addams Family comes out in 1964. The Munsters come out in 1964. On the surface, it's a weird family, and they live in a house, and they're dark and spooky, even though they're really completely different. Mm-hmm. We have Bewitched. We have I Dream of Jeannie. We have Star Trek, and we have Doctor Who. Sometimes it's just mass consciousness, and things just sort of. And also, motels and hotels were really scary. They especially the ones they still are when you're in out of town places, like out of the way places. So. Maybe there is something to the fact that if you go to a motel or a hotel in the middle of nowhere, you might be dead. You might end up dead if you're a pretty girl.
The other big thing though that this one does is it's killing the main character off. They're just killing a main character off. She wasn't famous. So even if they had gone first, it wouldn't been a big deal. But in the other one, they're killing Janet Leigh off, which is a major deal. Killing not only the main character, but killing off an actress that everyone knows. So the timing of it will be very interesting. And like Richard-Lael says, it may be coincidence, in terms of the hotel stuff. Yeah, all of that. But the plot of killing the person off halfway through that I'd have to look at the timing of the script and see if one saw the other one. Did Hitchcock see this one? Did this one see, or is it truly a coincidence? Which would be pretty amazing. But yeah,
I think it's in the ethers. I think it's in that mass consciousness or whatever, because I know from living in Hollywood and being in Hollywood, and people, when we're doing a sizzle roll, we have a pitch, we have a one sheet, and all of a sudden no one's talked about it, but a production company will get 3 of the similar show one sheets at the same time. It wasn't in the news. It wasn't something talked about. I believe it's literally pulled out of the ether. So in the ethers were these bad, incorrectly New England witches. I see it constantly with television, with YouTubers, with things that never make it to air because there's 12 submitted all at the same time, and nobody talked to anybody on those. There was not a book to read from.
And we see that at Llewellyn too. All of the sudden, my fellow acquisitions editors see all of a sudden we'll get 10 submissions on the same topic. But when we talk about technical stuff, it's a little different. However, this was technically a time when people were starting to push boundaries with storytelling in film too, because you're getting into the 60s. You're in the beatnik era. So even in film, technically, the way they're telling stories, they're going to start to push boundaries. Let's put witches on television. Let's put Satan on television. Let's put these things out there that were never there before. And that would include technically killing a character off halfway through, because nobody ever did it. I think Game of Thrones took that to a new level. I think Game of Thrones just up-leveled that way.
Spoiler alerts.
They said, let me just hold my beer for a second.
When I watched Game of Thrones for the first time, my aunt had been pestering me to watch it, and her favorite activity was after every episode I watched to be like, who's your favorite character? Well, now who's your favorite character? Well, who's your favorite character? And then I'd pick someone and she'd be like,
Can I just be honest? We're in the last season right now, revisiting it, watching first time with my son, and we're doing the same thing. So who's your favorite character?
Yeah.
How do you like him? Who do you think's gonna survive?
I can't wait. I literally I've been debating what is the right age to show it to Nathan, because I know he'd love it, but it's not yet. I'm thinking at least 18, but I'm hanging on and waiting for that moment so that he can watch it and I can watch him, and then be like, what do you think is gonna happen? Oh, do you like that guy? No. And
Well,
I can't. Yeah.
I watched Game of Thrones with my wife who had not read the books yet. So when I knew something terrible was going to happen, sometimes I would just stare at her and not watch the show because I wanted to see her reaction to what was going to happen. And she never disappointed me.
No, it's not disappointing watching somebody watch the show. We're
Yeah.
on season 8. We just finished episode 3. And if you know which episode it is, there was a lot of screaming in the house last night.
Mhm.
But yes, they up-leveled to kill the character off. But
Oh,
I still can't hear Reigns of Castamere without
yes.
losing my mind.
Okay, back to Horror Hotel, everybody. As we're moving through time, does anybody have anything else that they want to say that we haven't said yet before we move
Oh,
to quotes?
I
Yeah.
do.
Yes.
So I will give it that I liked the ambiance, especially because when they were going into the hatch and crawling down into the basement, that is what it's like going down into the basement of the John Proctor house, but smaller. So I was like, well, they did get something historically accurate. This is about what it would have looked like at the time. So I did make a note of that.
Oh, that's cool.
Um,
No, and what
yeah.
is that obligatory? You have to go into the basement when you're alone and a woman and scared.
It's the
Story of
safest
my
place
life.
in the house.
Yeah,
I have been in deep, dark holes before.
I'm sure you have.
Don't
I got big orbs. All right. Courtney, do we have any quotes on this?
get excited. I only have 2.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, rein in your just adjust
One of
your
them, please, one of
expectations.
them be burn, witch, burn, witch, burn. Please,
It's
please,
not-
please.
No, I already said that one, and it's not. One that I thought was a little insightful was they were discussing like witches being tangible thing like versus science or whatever. So he says, I don't even remember who said it, but the guy said, when I look into a microscope, Driscoll, I see bacteria swimming, fighting, existing. That's real. These witches that were persecuted and burned in the 17th century were real too, but they weren't witches. They were pitiful human beings, victims of hysteria. And I was like, oh, great. Now stop saying they burned in the New England town, because they did not. And I didn't like that. And then the one thing that like caught me, and I paused the movie and I wrote it down because I laughed out loud, was when the cop shows up at the hotel and the antique dealer lady, the granddaughter of the preacher, is like telling him about the book, and she hands it to him, and he's looking at it, and he says, treatise on devil worship. I must put this in the report. Like, he was just so excited that he was already writing a report, and I was like, oh, write it down, put it in the report. So I thought that was fun. So those are my 2 quotes. And burn the witch, burn the witch, burn the witch.
See, that's my favorite.
It's so stupid. I can't like it because it makes me so mad.
there was
I'm a
one
hunka burning love.
And wasn't there a little repeat when they were driving? How do you get to that town? How do you get to that town? How do you get to that town? That was kind of interesting. I don't remember exactly what they said.
Neither
Maybe
do I,
they-
because it was
Deja
not
vu.
very quotable.
Maybe they burned witches in Whitewood, Massachusetts, though. It's just a
Maybe they
different place. You know?
Oh, here we go.
Okay.
Get ready.
Oh,
Whitewood, Massachusetts. Come for the witchcraft, stay for the fog.
yep.
Oh, that's so good.
Mm.
All about the fog. It's all about the fog.
Yep.
All about
So there is no Whitewood, Massachusetts.
It's not on any
Also-
map, but it
Nope.
exists.
It's a small town outside of Salem. You would never have seen it.
And it only
Right.
has 3 buildings in it. I mean,
Sure.
It's kind of like Brigadoon. It only
Fantastic.
appears every 7 years.
And what's gonna happen is this is why the people in Salem are crazy about the Bewitched statue, because people watch movies like this and then they come to Salem and then they say, where were the witches burned? And the answer is England, and not Salem or Whitewood, Massachusetts.
I'm going to come to Salem next time and go, where is the fog? I need some
There.
fog.
Sometimes there's fog, sometimes there's a lot of it. You can have that.
Yeah. But it
But
should be
I
all
wonder-
the time.
Was the fog, or was it smoke from burning the witches?
See, now you're
Ghost-
thinking.
Ghost smoke. Is that what you're
It ghost
suggesting?
smoke? No,
Mhm.
just actual smoke. What does it look like when a body gets burned at the stake? How much smoke is there?
It was so the burning people with the crosses was so cheesy and silly though. That broke me at the end. Especially it was you have to get caught in the shadow of the cross at night when there are no
Right.
shadows.
In the fog.
That was tough. That was tough. That cost me a whole point in my review of this film.
We're getting into your review any second, the Mankey moment. But that burning of that first girl, was that not the sexiest strapped on wet t-shirt dress burning you have ever seen?
I mean, give me the
Yeah.
chains any day of the week, but not the fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I get accused of being flaming all the time.
Ba-ba-boom.
we
I'm a
gotta-
flaming witch.
You're a flaming witch. Flaming. Jason.
Well, like Courtney, I checked into the horror hotel via YouTube, and it truly was a viewing experience full of horrors. However, I did learn several lessons while watching Horror Hotel, so I thought I would share those lessons while replicating some of my viewing experience. Before
Yes.
signing up for any college course, be sure to visit ratemyprofessor.com. Reading this entry for Professor Alan Driscoll, Christopher Lee, would have saved everyone a lot of grief. Professor Driscoll is one part interesting and one part menacing. I also can't help but think he's flirting with me when he speaks to me after class. Also, it seems as if at least one student from Professor Driscoll's class goes missing every year during spring break. Perhaps the requirements of his term paper. Are you man enough for the new Dodge Ram? This is a truck for manly men who like to do manly things, like drive around the desert and run over cactuses. Skip! Are you worried about the weather on your upcoming trip to Massachusetts? Well, don't be. I have it on good authority that Massachusetts weather near Candlemas, February 2nd, is like a perfect fall day. There's no snow to worry about, no single-digit temps. You'll love it. Get over to Whitewood, Massachusetts as soon as you can, and don't forget to bring your swimsuit and swim in all that fog, and a robe to be sacrificed in. Having trouble with the big moment? Unsure you'll be ready when she finally says, now is the time? Never worry again when you enter the Bone Zone from Online Medical. Skip! Driving alone late at night on the back roads in the fog? If you are, maybe you shouldn't pick up hitchhikers. I'm pretty sure that's how a whole lot of ghost stories start. Sometimes you should just call it a day and head back to school. Turn right around. Tired of having money to do the things you want to do? Well, you don't have to have that money anymore. Instead, you can waste it all and end up in bankruptcy court at bet.com. Bet all your money on who will win the big game or how fast your pill from Bone Zone will work. If you can think of it, you can bet on it. Skip! Visiting Whitewood, Massachusetts? Here's a tip. Don't go shopping there in the dark, late at night, in the fog. Besides, there are only 3-4 buildings in all of Whitewood to begin with. Exploring can probably wait until tomorrow. My suggestion would be just to stay in your hotel room and keep to yourself. Late night dancing? I don't think so. Let's stay safe, especially on the grim dark night of Candlemas, that legendarily lethal night when the Catholic Church replaces old candles. Visit an old and abandoned. I'm about to cash this check for $50,000 for an accident I was involved in over 5 months ago. The same accident that the insurance company told me they would pay me nothing for because it was self-inflicted. If I hadn't upset Courtney Buckley, there would have been no hex. But now I've taken Courtney to the cleaners because I had to watch an ad every 5 minutes on YouTube to finish up this movie.
That was the best one yet. and it was exactly what it was like.
Mm-hmm.
It was so accurate.
One of the ads I actually quoted, the personal injury ad at the end. I actually quoted it from YouTube up until a point. They did not say Courtney Buckley.
I do hex a lot of people. So.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, we have one thing to do next, and that is vote on this fine or not so fine film. Before we get going, wands up. I'm not using a wand. I'm using a hotel bell. Hotel bell. Hotel bell.
If you need anything, ring the bell.
Okay, wait. I can Heather up. This is up, by the way. In case you didn't know, this is bells
Your
up.
big orbs are up.
My big orb is up. Jason is 3/4 up and Courtney's 3/4 down. Does that cancel each other out?
Yes, it does. It's a good
That
film.
makes it like
I'm
this is
almost
what it
there.
does.
Yeah, that
gives,
evens out this way.
that evens it out at a half.
You even it out. So, okay, you people in the chat room, ceremonial dagger is neutral of Robert. One's up, gay Ryan. One's up, horns up for Calvin. Yes. One's almost up, Tabitha. You're a little like Jason, getting it up, but not quite there. Stilettos are neutral. Okay, we haven't had the second one's down yet, have we? Oh well,
No.
Court keeps
No.
down, but no. For a movie that deserved to be lost in the fog of time.
Yeah, my bone zone needs another 4 hours.
I actually would watch it again on a bigger screen this time, again alone in a farmhouse somewhere. Like Heather, that's the kind of horror film I like. So we got neutral and we got up. So what do we got next week?
We got Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, 1937, going back further in time because the new Snow White is coming out. So we're going to talk about the old one, the original.
There is no new Snow White coming out. I refuse to believe that.
Wow.
There's a lot of other Snow Whites, and I'll have a nice list for everybody next week. But we are going back to the original, the OG Snow White, 1937, Disney's animated. So get ready.
Is this gonna be one of the oldest movies we've ever done?
I'm pretty sure that my spirit witch.
What did you just say? Which one?
I said I'm pretty sure that my spirit witch is in that movie. I think it's when she's the little old lady and she's coming out the hatch. That gift. That's me at all times.
This is going to be the oldest movie that we've watched. Actually, the I Married a Witch was 1942. That would probably be the next one. Yeah.
Okay, so stepping back in time. So we got a couple minutes left. I know we heard a little bit of where Jason and Heather's going to be. Does anybody want to say where they can go find you guys at if they want to go there? What is it you are going to be at?
We are going to be at Paganicon, just right outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. It is one of America's biggest pagan festivals. Last year, there were over 1,000 attendees. And in addition to me and Heather, or Heather and I, there are probably like 24 pretty well-known pagan author types there. So it's a really big festival. It's a really well-done festival. It's really fun. And it'll be above freezing next week in Minneapolis.
Yay, that is good. And what are you doing your workshop on, Heather?
I'm doing a workshop on poppets and poppet making, and then another one on haunted dolls. And I definitely will be having pictures or something up of your book to let them know that where they can find that. But that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to decide which dolls are coming with me right now, Patti.
Oh, that must be a very difficult decision because I'm sure they're all raising their hand.
I have a suggestion. Take that clown and then leave it there so it stops looking at me.
He's been to Beginnicon and he may go again.
But
he's not. He's coming back.
No.
I only take Philip with me.
I will be in California coming up this weekend. I will be at V. Neil's Vampire Weekend. I'll get to see Patti and Sebastian and Father Sebastian rather. And then, of course, next year we're still going to Scotland, the Sacred Tours. But that's next year, 2026. So save your pennies if you want to go.
Beautiful. So yes, V. Neil's the Vampire Weekend, Vampire Ball. She is the makeup artist who created what? Edward Scissorhands, The Lost Boys, wow. Mrs. Doubtfire. You know her well, much better than I, but this should be pretty cool.
Edward Scissorhands,
yeah,
the Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean,
she was on the show and I fangirled real hard and I tried to hold it together and I don't think I was successful, honestly.
Yes. Give me a hug for Ryan. There you go. I like
this weekend. Sorry. This weekend I will be celebrating Nathan's birthday. He's turning 15. So happy birthday to Nathan.
Wow.
It's scary.
1 year closer to Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Yep.
And you're closer.
Congratulations. Happy birthday to him.
Right. This is great. And I will be with Richard-Lael in Burbank at the Vampire Weekend doing a panel on vampire culture. And I've never even seen a vampire burned under the shadow of a cross, I must say, but we're working on it. Somebody must. So everybody, it is that time. It is 7 o'clock or 10 o'clock, depending on which part of the country you are in. It is time to cackle. 1, 2, 3.
Burn the witch! Burn the witch!